This is an excellent question. So the TLDR for this video is dark fantasy is what happens if fantasy and horror had a baby. So at your top level, you've got fantasy as a whole. That involves any story that uses supernatural or magical influences to tell their story. That's stuff like Dragons in the Industrial Era and His Majesty's Dragon, or schools for witchcraft and wizardry in something like Harry Potter. And from there, it branches into a bunch of different subgenres. So romantasy is probably the most well-known right now. It's kind of a mix between romance and fantasy. But two ends of the spectrum I want to cover in this video are Noble Bright and dark fantasy. So Noble Bright is kind of the height of escapism. Your characters are strong and noble and kind. They have very few flaws, if any. They usually have a magic weapon. They've vanquished the dragon. The villains are undoubtedly, undeniably evil and they need fighting. And then when they're fought, everyone has a party. The romantic interests almost always fall in love and end up together. It is very clean, nice. Again, leans on that escapism. It's hopeful fantasy. Really hopeful. I think that's the best way to put it. Noble Bright is hopeful. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Grimdark. And Grimdark's where I tend to write. So all my books are Grimdark. Grimdark deals with darker themes as a general rule of thumb. The antagonists are pretty much always more nuanced, more sympathetic. They usually have a backstory. I personally like to write prequels for my villains' backstories. I just find that fun. And they're not usually just after power for power's sake. They usually are in it for like legacy for their family or their own survival, or they started this thing and it just kind of grew out of control. Like they're usually a bit more sympathetic than just, haha, I'm going to kill them all. But one of, in my opinion, the defining qualities of dark fantasy is struggle. You're not winning right away. You're not, your characters are very rarely from any kind of like upper class. They have to fight, they have to scrabble, they have to survive. The settings are usually also a lot less beautiful. They're usually grimy, they're usually gritty. There's almost always an oppressive power structure in place, whether that's a government, a gang, a mages guild, magocracy. And your protagonist has to deal with that, whether that's directly opposing them or just working within the constraints that those power structures put on them. As much as I'd love for you to read my books as a taste of dark fantasy, especially The Ghost of Middermere, my newest book, I have to recommend, if you're just testing it out, that you try the best of the best. And that is Joe Abercrombie. Now, Joe Abercrombie is the king of Grimdark. He has probably at least a dozen books in one setting. They interweave, there's cameos, it's incredible. Highly recommend. If you don't want to commit to that big a read, start with his Half a King. It's one of my all-time favorite books. It's so good, and it's part of a trilogy, but it honestly works as a standalone. Like if you get to the end and you're like, I'm more of a Noble Bright person, that's fine. It stands alone. You won't be sitting there being like, but what happens? Which is good. So to summarize, grimdark fantasy is something with fantastical elements, a grittier setting, sympathetic villains, or at least villains who have a reason to be doing what they're doing, darker themes, and usually some kind of oppressive power structure involved somewhere. I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments how I did, if I missed anything, what your recommended Noble Bright and dark fantasy reads are, and if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about or cover. Thanks so much. Happy reading.